Gentlemen, welcome to the National Opera Center. My name is Laura Lee Everett. I'm the Director of Artistic Services, and I'm so glad to have you all here this evening for our final Making Connections event of the season. Making Connections is part of Opera America's overall commitment to providing professional development opportunities for artists around the country by interviewing experienced artists and experts in the field. Although several people on this panel keep saying, I'm not an expert.
Exactly.
But I would believe that all of them, by virtue of their experience, have a great deal to share with you, and we're so excited to have all of them here this evening. On your seats is a flyer for our New York Symposium that is part of the national conference that Opera America hosts every year. This year it is going to be in Vancouver. But while we are there, we're inviting people who are part of the New York Opera contingent to participate in the conference here, where there will be simulcasting from Vancouver to the Opera Center and simulcasting from the Opera Center back to Vancouver. It is our theme for this year is Opera Out of Bounds, and a great deal of what we will be discussing is things that don't happen in the normal context of doing opera and performance in a theater, as we have all sort of been raised and become accustomed to doing. It should be a very exciting event. If you are able to join us, we would love to have you. We are joined by our live audience here at the National Opera Center on a live stream from around the world. So welcome to all of you who are watching through your computer camera's eye. And you are invited to text in any questions when we get to the Q&A portion of this evening's discussion. The information should be on the bottom of the screen, and we love to have participants from outside of the Opera Center as well. If you're not already a member of Opera America, I encourage you to become one. This year, as our opening inaugural year in the Opera Center, all of our programming has been free, but that will not necessarily stay that way for next year. And it will be an awesome member benefit, as well as being a contributing member to what's happening in your field. Tonight's event will end with an informal reception in the back of the room, which I encourage all of you to stay and have a moment to greet and meet the artists. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our good friends and thank you all for being here. Mr. Morris Robinson, Miss Lauren Worsham, Mr. Ron Rains, and Mr. Brian DeMaris.
Thank you, Lauren Lee. Actually, we were just talking here, and we thought we might toss the first question to all of you, at least those of you in the room, to figure out who we're speaking to. And just by a simple show of hands, how many of you would call yourselves opera singers? How many of you would call yourselves music theater singers? And you're welcome to raise your hands more than once, of course.
Let's raise the other hand.
Right. Directors, instrumentalists, including pianists, coaches. Great. Anything? Dancers, administrators, designers. Well, good. We look to be in good company here of people who do lots of everything. You know, hopefully you'll hear very little from me, and I'm going to start out with a pretty broad question to each of our panelists, and we can go right down the row here. How did you get here? How did you end up in this place, from your training, your upbringing, your training, to the wide career that you have?
Oh, wow. I took a non-traditional path here. I think if you're familiar with me at all, most people know that I took a very non-traditional path into this career. Yeah, I sang all my life. I sang in the Atlanta Boy Choir when I was a kid, sang in church, went to a high school performing arts, took a football scholarship, played ball, quit my job at the age of 30, started studying music at Boston University. Well, there's a little bit that happened in between that, but I sang the national anthem for an audition, and they heard my voice and said, "You should be singing opera." And I was like, "Really?" And 2 years at Boston University with Sharon Daniels and working with the Boston Lyric Opera, singing every small role they could throw my way. I got into the Metropolitan Young Artist Development Program, made my debut there at 2002, and have sung 100 and something performances there since, and most recently Fernando in Trovatore this past fall. So I'm currently at Washington National Opera rehearsing Showboat, which is probably why I'm here, because therein lies a crossover. So that's the 2-minute version.
Laura.
Well done. I guess I came by it in a traditional, non-traditional way. At least traditionally to musical theater, it's what I always wanted to do. Moved to the city after college. I didn't go to conservatory. I have a degree in Spanish literature, and that's it. and auditioned, and slowly found myself making more inroads into new music and opera over the past 4 years, just because of people I've met and the direction that I think a lot of opera is going these days, with storytelling emphasis. I've kind of lucked out. Right time, right place. The end.
I was raised in East Texas, a little town called Nacogdoches. My father was an evangelical minister. I learned to sing in church. I sang church all my life. I was in tremendous music programs in Texas at that time, and I think I got my classical influence from those wonderful programs. I went to Oklahoma City University, where I graduated, had an incredible amount of opportunities to perform there. They do a lot of performing. In the summers, I was an apprentice, 2 summers at Wolf Trap, 2 summers at Santa Fe, and I moved to New York in 1975, before most of you were born, and started my operatic career. And I was in the opera world basically for about 6 years. And during that time, I spent 1 year at Juilliard in the American Opera Center. But in 1983, Houston Grand Opera produced a production of Showboat, and I did Gaylord Ravenel in that, and that's where I kind of switched over, because I was always much more suited for the American classic theater, musical theater roles, as opposed to opera roles that other guys did better. And then fast forward, and I've been doing this, and I was on television for a while, and concerts, and so I've had a very unorthodox and yet interesting career. As I look back on it and think about it, it's been kind of interesting.
I'm curious, you know, actually, two of you, Morris and Lauren, you threw me off a little bit, because I was going to say, you know, based on your training and that experience through your formative years in college, you know, what was that first experience outside of the genre? But Morris, your first experience was after playing football and, you know, being what we might refer to in the opera or music theater world, being a normal human being. And
I always ask people, are you a singer or are you normal? So.
My question was, what was the first experience in the new world like, and what made you go, oh wow, and to not avoid a cultural cliche, I'm not in Kansas anymore. What did you learn from that first experience?
You mean the first musical theater thing or the first thing?
Well, let's do the first thing.
Yeah, well, my first performance was singing The King and Aida with Boston Lyric Opera. It's the first opera I ever saw. And I was standing on stage holding my aunts, going, what the hell am I doing up here? You know? And, you know, look, I went to high school performing arts, so I did do some performing before. We did the Mozart's Requiem my junior year in high school, the Haydn's Creation my senior year, so I was 17 then. I think I was 30 at the time when I did this debut in Boston Lyric, but, you know, I jumped into it head first. And, you know, I determined that if I was going to sacrifice the income that I was making and the job and the career, and I had I'm married, I had a house, had a mortgage, had bills, and if I was going to make this sacrifice, I need to delve into it 100%. Now, obviously you have to have the goods to produce, and you also have to have the aptitude and the willingness and the desire to be taught and coached and learn how to decipher the good from the bad and negotiate and navigate these fields. But, you know, I've been blessed with that gift, I guess, as well, to be able to be surrounded by the right people, and it worked out for me. I don't want ever, and I'm segueing a little bit, but I don't want people to ever think that because you can read my story in a paragraph, that it was a very rapid ascent into this career that I'm having. There are lots of days, lots of hours, lots of really hard work that one has to put in to get here. And I think the topic of this discussion also talks about going from that world now to another world and crossing between those two. And just as you have to study and practice and prepare yourself for one thing, then you have to do the same amount of work and dedication and diligence to make yourself be successful on the other side. So that's my other 2-minute answer. So.
Lauren, how about you? And go ahead and talk about, you know, that first experience in opera or musical theater.
In opera, well, I always sang. I sang since I was a little kid. I used to be tone deaf, and I had some operations because I had tumors because I had really small ear tubes, you know. Anyway, so then I was able to sing. My parents were very disappointed. But
We're not.
yeah, so yeah. But I always sang, and it started. There were hints of it when I was younger. I had a voice teacher who suddenly said, "Oh, you're not an alto, you're a soprano." That happened, you know, in high school. And my freshman year in college, I was cast as Cunegonde in Candide, like undergraduate production, and was shocked that I could sing that high. But I didn't really do anything with it until I was cast again as Cunegonde in Candide with New York City Opera after college. And they double cast us. It was a Hal Prince production, and they wanted basically a kind of a singing Cunegonde and an acting Cunegonde. And you know, I was the acting one, and they set me up with a trainer and a wonderful woman named Virginia Grasso, who I still work with, and she opened up my top. And you know, from then I was able to do a lot more. And since then, it's just kind of kept going in that direction. But I honestly had no idea and hadn't really explored it until that point. And it's very different. It's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding, I'd say.
Ron.
My first performance, the thing where I got the bug, I think, was high school production of Oklahoma. And that's really where I got the disease, I think.
How about the first time you stepped foot in an opera house, for example, when you, or if your experiences ended up being in music theater, for each of you, actually, let's talk about that first moment in the other genre. What was that day like, or preparing for it?
We starting at this end again?
Well, we might as well. That's what Ron's saying. Yeah.
What's that?
That's what Ron says, yeah. Starting down there.
It gives you time to think about the answer, Ron. He's got the cheat sheet. Well, I was approached to do Joe in Showboat, which, for obvious reasons, I make a pretty good Joe. I mean, yeah. So therein lies the conflict for myself, because here I am, you know, very newly coming into this business. I've been around for a while now. I've done a lot of things, but you don't want to ever get sidetracked such that you are typecast or believed to be something that you really aren't. But it fit me like a glove. So it's like, okay, what do you do here? I think I'd done enough at this point in my life to establish myself as a German-Italian operatic singer. And, you know, Joe sings Old Man River. So then it comes the whole, you know, typecasting, racial thing. Do you want to be the big black guy that sings Old Man River? Or do you want to be the big black guy that sings Spada for Chile, you know? This is not funny, guys. It's a real dilemma. But, you know, I mean, you have to make decisions. And I came to the conclusion that, A, I wasn't doing a disservice to myself to sing this character, because Joe isn't what I thought he was before I did research, you know, before I became familiar with the material. Joe is a very cerebral person who's speaking metaphorically about the river as life passing by. So, I mean, he's not, you know, this dumb character. He's actually someone that has a brain that actually is forward-thinking and very smart. So then, okay, now how do you approach it musically? If we're in a room this size and I'm singing Old Man River, it's going to be very sweet, very intimate, very crooned, because that's a choice that you can make artistically in a room this size. Fortunately for me, it worked out that we were doing it at Chicago Lyric Opera unamplified, 3,800 seat house. So it allowed me to use the voice and the training that I've been using before. Now, there are subtle nuances that one incorporates. You know, as singers, you all know that you should never really come off the voice. You should always use support and always uphold the integrity of your technique. And I'm able to do that with this role because of the grandioseness of the houses that I'm singing it in, the orchestration, and keeping in mind that when this piece was written in the 1920s, I mean, there was no amplification in the first place. So the guys that were doing it then, Paul Robeson, were really, you know, they were equipped with the vocal power to reach the backs of houses. And, you know, if I'm on stage at Chicago Lyric and I'm crooning like we are in this room, there's going to be about 2,800 disappointed people. And as Stephen Lord says, the people in the back spend the least amount of money and they scream the loudest, so you have to, you want them to hear. But no, I mean, seriously, it was an opportunity for me. It was kind of the perfect storm. The venue was perfect. for size. The role is such that I can utilize the same technique that I'm using to sing Spadafficile or Ramfis. And when it all came together, it seems as though it was a nice venture to the other side while keeping in touch with the vocal integrity that I've worked for years. So that's kind of my first experience. So I think it was set up perfectly for me in that regard.
Do you prepare any differently for Showboat than you do for Aida?
Well, I mean, anytime that you're preparing a role at all, no matter what language it's in, no matter what period, you have to research the character and try to become that character. If you're asking technically, if I'm singing the Mozart Requiem this week, I'm going to prepare a little bit differently than I would if I'm singing the Verdi Requiem. If I'm singing Ferrando and Trovatore, I'm going to prepare that differently than I'm singing, Faselt and Das Rheingold. So everything is approached differently. When I'm singing Joe and Showboat, I have to make sure I have everything's lined up appropriately, obviously, but I don't think I prepare anything differently. I think one thing to always remember is stay in touch with the vocal integrity that you have and try very hard not to steer away from that technique. And I sing to the room that I'm in for the most part, but fortunately I'm not in rooms this size, so I don't have to really alter what I'm gifted with. And that's kind of how I've approached this. So I hope that makes sense. Huh?
Oh, it's terrific, and it's a great segue to Lauren, who I hear on the top of your resume you label as a belty soprano, and you have a rock band, and you sing with microphones, and you were on a national tour where you sang contemporary music theater. Mm-hmm. Take us away.
I drink lots of water. Don't go to bars. I mean, honestly, really, you can belt if you know how to belt healthy, and there's a lot of unhealthy belting out there. I wouldn't even pretend to say that I know how to teach that, but I think that there is a healthy way to do it. I know that a lot of teachers, the worlds are so black and white, literally. You have opera teachers who tell you never absolutely belt, it'll ruin your voice, and then you have belting teachers who tell you that the opera sounds silly, and
we know.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. And basically, you like with anything, you take what's useful to you and throw out the rest. Because everybody's different. Everybody's voice is different. I honestly don't know how I've been able to do the things that I've been able to do. I feel really lucky. It's been mostly about meeting the right people at the right time and taking huge risks. When I did Cunegonde, I was terrified. And I was so happy they set me up with Virginia because I wouldn't have been able to do it without her. And and since then I've continued to do more opera, and I've set up a great relationship with New York City Opera, and they keep hiring me, thank God. But opera certainly does, in my opinion, coming from the musical theater world, take a lot more work in terms of vocal technique than spelling bee, does, or pop music. And that's one of the great things about pop music, actually, is you can just relax and just sing. And you don't have to be, you can be growly, you can be breathy, and it's, in a lot of ways, it's really a nice release, for me, at least. I don't know if that answers the question.
What was the question?
I don't remember. I think we're probably here to ask questions more than answer them tonight.
Right.
This is what I'm getting. How do you keep, you can answer this, Lauren and Ron, I'm interested in your answer, or more questions. Your thoughts. How do you keep in touch with your voice in all of this? And that's your personal voice, like what you have to say in your art, as well as what your technique is.
Well, vocally, I'd say I have a lot of different voices. Honestly, I'd say what my voice is, who I am as Lauren, is I am 150% stage beast, and when I'm out there, it's like I believe in acting things through, like, really intensely and really with it, and I think that's why I've gotten a lot of work in opera lately, because things seem to be moving in that sort of a direction, and that is what I am true to. Like, I don't believe in falseness on stage, and I just won't do it, and that is, I guess, my true voice. But in terms of a voice, I have a lot of different voices, character voices, and things that I play with and use.
How about you, Ron?
Well, I think one of the questions on there was something about what alterations do you make in singing Broadway. And Morris talked a little bit about this. I don't really make any adjustments. Broadway is more about the text than it is about the sound that's your instrument, that's your given. Too much sound scares the hell out of them, and unless it's really Paolo Schott doing South Pacific, then all of a sudden it's wonderful. Oh wow, what a voice! And also, you must understand the marketplace in Broadway kind of dictates the sound. When I started getting into the Broadway side of it was in '83. Now you remember in '81 and '82 a show called Cats came to Broadway. Well, that was the British invasion that changed for like 20 years the sound of what we want to hear now. And thank God the opera company started doing the classical carousels and Kiss Me Kates and the Manchas and all that kind of stuff, because I actually went back to the opera world doing those. But now then, because of, I think, Brian Stokes Mitchell and Paolo, and just because of the marketplace, the voice has come back a little bit. So it's okay to have a voice, I think, now. And if more shows are produced that way, they will... that will be, it's just supply and demand in Broadway. I mean, it's basically whatever the marketplace dictates, that's what we want. And I have never made any adjustments other than, and I will quote John Raitt. Everybody know who John Raitt is? Yeah. Who doesn't? Did you say you didn't? John Raitt originated the role of Billy Bigelow in Carousel and the Pajama Game, and did tons of stuff. And he told me, you studied opera? I said, yes, sir. I did. Incidentally, he sang the Largo for Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein II when he auditioned for it. But he said the opera singer, and you had to kind of know him, he was a character. He says, oh. And I say, oh. In other words, it's not oh like this, it's just oh. It's more of a pure kind of speaking, and yet the throat's open, the body, everything is just not those kind of bigger vowels. It's more because you got to stay a lot of text, and especially if you ever do a Sondheim show. And Porter, any of them, terrific lyricists. But yeah, and I hate to use the word thin your voice out, because that's not it. That's a horrible word for an opera singer. But it is you don't use your full large pear-shaped tones. And if you ever audition for a musical theater, people don't really hold that note out too long, or unless it's asked for it. They still are not quite comfortable with sound. You know, they want to be, but they don't know. I don't know.
What are some other things about music theater people, maybe, or if you want to pick up there, Morris?
I was going to add, you mentioned not changing your technique and how text is very important. Obviously, text is very important in opera as well, but you focus more on the vowel because the romantic language is like Italian, focus on the vowel. But I was doing an audition at the Metropolitan Opera, incidentally, just about a year ago, to do Mahagoni, which your wife is directing tonight. And I can't remember what I was singing. It was Alaska Wolf Joe I was auditioning for. So I flew back from Chicago, and I learned it to death with Craig Terry, and I'm ready to go in there and just do my thing, and I'm coaching with Craig Rutenberg. And I go in and I'm like, doing my Morris Robinson thing. And he says, this sounds great, but you sound too much like Zarastro. I said, oh. Can you lighten it up a little bit and sound more like this? And then that was the one moment I realized that, within my arsenal of vocal training, I was able to make that adjustment. So I didn't really abandon my technique, as Ron was saying. I just changed the way I presented it. So instead of focusing on the vowel line so much, I changed to the articulation of pronouncing the words in tune. And that might be the one time that I sat here and when you were saying that, I was thinking, well, that might be the case. But I don't think I abandoned my technique at all. I think I kept the integrity of my voice was there. It's just moving everything to the front of your mouth and pronouncing things with your lips and your tongue more so
Just
than
like you're speaking.
just as I'm speaking, as opposed to talking like this. And so I can't even do it. Eric Halverson does it really well. I just can't do it. But yeah, it's that type of switch. So yeah, we're saying I guess
it's an adjustment as opposed to really an abandonment of your technique. It's
your voice is always your voice, but you can change the placement of pronunciation to fit other genres. So yeah, sorry, it's my 2 cents.
Lauren, can you talk to us a bit about those? There's the worlds of repertoire and the style, and then there's the worlds of the people you're working with and the industries and the audiences. Can you talk about your experiences, any differences there?
Vast differences. Number one, opera, in my experience, you tend to, you get a little bit more respect as a performer than you do in musical theater. And I hate to say it, but it's true. They protect your voice as if it's an instrument. In musical theater, you can have 3 10 out of 12s in a row and then open and then, have a cover rehearsal the next day. It's just literally, they can really work you to death. For better, for worse. And because of that, a lot of musical theater people, we're scrappy, we're used to doing our own hair and makeup. That's a luxury, man, let me tell you. You're used to being injured and just having to do it, because there's no one else who's going to do it for you. And that does actually lead to a lot of people burning out and losing their voices and, not being able to perform at the highest capacity that they could. And you hear that sometimes, when you go see shows, that you see people who look like they're tired. But so that's a big difference. But by the same token, I think musical theater a lot of times is not treated, because it isn't treated as preciously. A lot of times there's more room acting-wise to do some things that are seen as riskier or more bizarre. I'm working on a piece now with Christopher Alden. He, and from my opera friends, I was told, oh my God, he's crazy. He's crazy, he's crazy, he's crazy. But honestly, to me, he just seems like a theater director. I was just shocked the first day, because he's just asking people to do crazy things, things that opera singers, I think, aren't necessarily used to. Like sing this while, squatting and like with your face against the wall and look really angry about it. But it's a light little Offenbach, bit. And so to me, that just seems like a theater director. They want you to play, they want you to, really there are no good theater director. Once your input and is totally open to any bizarre, crazy idea that you might have, is not thinking about how you need to support your sound or your safety necessarily. So, and I think both of those things can be helpful, to kind of cross-pollinate, respect yourself a little more, but also not be so afraid to take some risks that might be scary. And, you'll probably be able to do it, squatting and weird stuff that Christopher Alden asked you to do.
Yeah. Ron, what's your experience between Broadway and opera houses?
Good.
That's the right answer, right?
No, the opera houses, you have your own makeup people, and you only do 3 shows a week, and all that stuff is good, and I like the opera schedule, but 8 a week on Broadway is separates the men from the boys, and you better have a technique or you're going to crash and burn. And there's some incredible singers on Broadway. They have to produce 8 a week, and the 8 a week just keep coming. 8 gone. Man, you have no life. You have no, especially if you're part of one of the characters that are carrying the show. I think Mary Martin said, "Hell is a long Broadway run." And because you really don't get to go out, and everybody says, "Oh, we're coming to see you. Let's go out to dinner afterwards." It's nope, not gonna happen. I'm going home, being quiet. resting my voice till the next night. It all becomes about the show. Your life absolutely. Now, of course, opera singers do it too, and they'll be silence and everything, but it's a different kind of energy. It's a different kind of energy.
I want to be. Oh yeah, go ahead.
David Pittsinger did that other show. Which one was it?
South Pacific?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's 100% opera singer, but he did that after Paolo left, and I had a conversation with him about it, and he says that because he's a 100% opera guy, and he says people thought I was crazy because I committed to doing 8 shows a week. He said, but then I thought about it. When you're rehearsing for opera, as I'm doing right now, I'm doing Broadway at Opera House, kind of confusing, but I had an orchestra rehearsal yesterday. I'm off today. I have a Zitz probe tomorrow. We have staging the next day in the house, so we're going to sing to see what it feels like. You add in all the rehearsals, you're singing about that much all week anyway. It goes back to what Ron says. Technique, technique, technique. The longevity of your voice, I think, depends on how well you sing.
And you'll learn to sing. You'll learn to sing and get the job done at 70% because you're going to have to learn how to get the job done at 70%.
Yep.
Now, everybody's happy when they've got 90, 95%. Wow, I love to sing. Yeah, but it's not going to be that way all the time. And you've got to have a technique that'll get you to 70, 75, 80, and the job is done, the show is, and you're fatigued, and you're tired, and you're not feeling so well. But you got a show to do. And you do that. You don't cancel so quickly. And what happens is it makes you a better singer. I mean, you can come out of a long run or a 6-month run and be vocally really good after you get a little rest, You've improved, if you will, because you've had to live with your instrument in a performing arena 8 times a week. And that's where you really, it's one thing to do it in your teacher's studio, it's another thing to do it in the arena.
And Ron, you are also a teacher.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that experience?
Well, I've been teaching for about 30 years under the radar because I believe you have to learn how to teach, just like you have to learn how to sing, And a lot of singers stop their careers and then become teachers, and it's a whole other thing, they bring a lot of knowledge, but communication and helping and connecting with you, I may hit it with you, I may not hit it with you, that's a whole other thing that takes time and learning. And so I've been learning to teach for a while, but I never did I haven't opened the doors yet for a big studio because I just can't do it yet, But that's going to be my last chapter.
I want to talk a bit about auditioning. And Lauren, I'm going to start with you here. Can you tell us about your audition experiences in both worlds, differences between them?
Yes. Yesterday I had an audition. I had a callback for musical theater, and I also had a show yesterday evening. It's for musical theater. If you get that to, well, it depends on which stage you're at. If you're going to open calls, you're going to prepare your own piece of music and present it. I know one of the things on there was the differences, in rep, what you try to choose. For me, for a musical theater audition, you want to show something that's going to show you acting. And you want to show something that's somewhat similar to the character that you will hopefully be playing. So if it's a comedy role, you want to do something funny. If she's sexy, you want to do something sexy. And you want to show how you can embody that sort of a character. It doesn't need to be the exact same character, but somewhere along those lines.
And this doesn't, see if you agree with it. This doesn't mean that when she says acting, it means you staging and doing all this stuff. It's confined. It's acting here. It's attitude and that, not staging. Some people stage. You're going, wait, stand still.
Don't walk around. I mean, at most you'd be, and if you're lucky in a room this big, probably half the size of this, and there'll be a table full like this of people sitting there, and you're just about 5 feet away from them. So if you're doing something huge, it's just going to look ridiculous. So you want to be small. They want to see it on your face. It's not as small as TV, but it's in between. And when you get to the callbacks and things for specific shows or appointments, if you have an agent or a manager, you're going to have to learn actual pieces from the actual show and scenes from the actual show. And sometimes with only 2 days' notice or 1 day's notice. And that is musical theater. And they expect you to have it and learn. You're better off if you have it memorized, but you don't have to have it memorized. It's okay to have a cheat sheet in your hand. And, you know, they might give you notes and adjustments, which is, I think, very different from opera auditions. You know, they might say, oh, do that again, but this time, you know, think about how much you blah, blah, blah. They're not going to give you singing notes. Well, they might, actually, if you're an opera singer. They might say to you, hey, make it a little smaller. Whereas opera auditions, you know, it's all on you. You come in with your own rep. You know, you have your songs that you're going to present. You know, you walk out on stage, and it's this grand affair. It feels very civilized. To me, it's much more intimidating, honestly, an opera audition, because, you know, it's like a huge house, and there's like 3 guys back there. You know, you can barely see, but at least, you know, it's in your hands in terms of, this is the song that I wanted to present and I've worked on. Whereas a lot of musical theater stuff you may have learned just 3 days before. But the main difference is, I'd say, in the acting. They want to see you act in a musical theater audition, and in a very real as possible way, not in a presentational way, if that makes sense. Hmm?
You know, one question I get from my students is about the audition binder for those who do both. You know, music theater audition binders look like anything from a file cabinet to a trash can condensed into a 3-inch binder, and then an opera audition binder is of 5 hours and maybe a music theater piece. What does yours look like?
Well,
do you have 2?
Yes. I do completely separate things. You know, for instance, in a musical theater audition, they don't want you to speak another language or sing another language, so take those out. Also, for musical theater, these days, I think we're moving out of it a little, thank God, but for a while, you know, I had quite a few 80s belty pop songs in there. Because, you know, a lot of the songs, the shows Next to Normal, and oh gosh, there's so many of them where it's pop music. It's kind of, well, it's Broadway pop music, and they want to hear you belt. You know, I think I have Crazy on You, Son of a Preacher Man. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one.
Just do that.
It's a good one. It's a good one. And then, you know, some legit-y stuff, you know, some stuff from like Wonderful Town and Light in the Piazza, you know, and then 102 in the Shade, Simple Little Things. That's a great audition song, I think, because it's so simple and small, but you can show a lot in a nice... They want to see you tell a story. I guess that's also part of it. When I say acting, they want to see you start somewhere and end up somewhere different by the end of the song. Your character goes on a journey. Whereas for opera, you know, they want to hear your voice. They want to hear what your voice can do. And of course, the acting is wonderful and get you really far. But they want to hear your voice.
Morris, any thoughts on auditioning, and how is auditioning different for the both of you?
I don't have to audition now. No, because, well, I did have to go back and sing this for Craig Rudenberg. I got the role, but they canceled the opera. Boo. But generally, once you get on an operatic stage, you are auditioning every night. Because I remember being at a show, I think last year, and after the show, I was in Chicago, I think. After the show, the artistic director from Washington National, San Francisco, Los Angeles were all at the show. And I'm like, I'm glad I didn't know these guys were going to be there before the show. But so opera's a little bit different in that once you get kick-started and you're on stage, you know, you're auditioning all the time. And this word of mouth, people are talking about you. You know, they're passing on whether you're good or bad. They come to shows. Now with YouTube clips out there, it gets even a lot easier. Now when I was a young artist at the Met, working with Ron's wife a lot, and that's a great point you made about the whole gesticulation thing and running around stage. You can't have any of that. But I was auditioning all the time. And it's the worst thing on the planet for an opera singer. I think it's just so unnatural because trying to sell a character without any props, any costume, any preparation, any setup for the scene, you have to become whatever it is you should be at that moment, at the drop of a hat, and it's really hard to do so. But you learn how to just do it. You know, you learn how to do it with a grain of salt, and you just try your best to do the best you can. And it becomes very, I think auditioning as a young artist when you're trying to get onto stage becomes very unpure a presentation because you don't really get a chance to develop the character. So you try to do it in a microwave type of situation, but it's very, very awkward. All I can say about that is, do the best you can to try to communicate with your eyes and communicate with your body language and communicate with your voice and your musical line. I mean, there's a lot of stuff written in those dots on the page that allow you to convey the message that you should convey. And if you hold true to the integrity of the composition, then you'll be successful. But, it's just a really awkward process. So I agree with you. It's very intimidating. Ron?
What was that question again?
This is just your experiences auditioning now. You said you had an audition the other day, actually.
Yeah, I auditioned for Follies that they did last year, and it was because the director did not know my work, and I had been in television for a while and had been out of the New York scene. So I gladly auditioned for it and got the role. But then I went, after that was over, Disney came and asked me if I would do a replacement for Joseph Pulitzer in Newsies on Broadway. And I said, come on, I know that they saw Follies. I'm either right for it or not. I mean, I don't, it's not that big of a role, but it's a good role. And so I said, I'm going to pass on this. And plus, I don't really want to work because I'm still, as I told Lauren, very much involved in holding on to this Follies experience that I had. And so they came back and said, okay, we'll offer to you then. But would you just come in and sing the song for Alan Menken? I said, sure, I'll sing it for him, holding the music, which I normally don't do, but I didn't have time to memorize it. So, but yeah, it's different. It's different. Just remember this. Yeah, because you're stepping into all different kinds of situations and different sized rooms, and the piano's out of tune and all that stuff. But remember that that's your moment. You got 2 arias, you got the one song. That is your time. And to really say, watch me, listen to me, listen to what I got to tell you. That's what, if you concentrate on that, usually you'll be fine. Because you can never, the elements and all that stuff change all the time. But auditioning is a strange thing. None of us like it. No. Yeah. And some people audition terrifically well, and that was it. That's the peak.
Yeah.
That's happened a lot too. Just like there are competition singers.
Yes.
Competition singers
Yes.
that win competitions and don't have careers.
Yep.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
All three of you are recitalists, cabaret singers, as we mentioned, rock singers, TV stars, and voiceover artists. How does the work from one genre infuse the work of another? What do you carry between each genre?
I guess I'll go first. When I was starting out with this whole thing and trying to figure it all out, I stuck to recital repertoire that very much mirrored what I would do on the operatic stage. So I sang a lot of Wolf and Schubert, and I did the Songs and Dances of Death, which Ron was there, and Mussorgsky. And as I've gotten more developed as an artist now, I've changed up the repertoire. And the approach is pretty much the same as I said before. But when you're in a recital, it does give you the opportunity to broaden the stroke, use a different brush, or use different strokes, if you will. And without, yet again, abandoning your technique and abandoning your voice, it gives you the opportunity to do things that you would do at home. You can croon some, you can go sotto voce, you can come off the voice, you can paint with different colors, because like I said before, you're not singing to 3,800 people when you're doing recitals. You're generally singing to a much smaller crowd in a much more intimate setting. And, the more I do recitals now, the more I even go further with getting away from what I do as my day job, because I enjoy having the flexibility to personally express things differently, but I've also accepted the fact that I can now take the risk to do things differently vocally, and it won't impact the meat of what I really do, because people know that I can do the other thing. So now it's a chance for me to, so like you said, you can show up 75%, not feeling 100%, and know that you can still deliver the goods. I can do that on any night, but especially when you have a recital going on, because you don't have to necessarily turn on the amplifier and put it on loud. You can actually hold back and push and pull and ebb and flow. And I think it really works really well with that environment. It's very, very liberating and refreshing to be able to do that. So I approach it from that perspective, that tonight I'm going to get a chance to just let them see every bit of me, So.
Yeah. I love singing rock music, as I mentioned before. It's also a band with my husband, so clearly I really enjoy that. The cabaret stuff, I recently befriended over the past 3 years, I guess, Steve Blyer, and he's the one who's actually gotten me into City Opera. And I do a lot of concerts with him, and one of my favorite things to do with him is sing at Henry's, which is this restaurant uptown where you're literally just singing in a restaurant. And he's on a little keyboard, and you can see everybody. They're like 2 feet in front of you, and you're singing a little ditty, and it's the essence of performing. You can also just see the audience right there, and it's one of my absolute favorite things to do because you can see them and play with them and look at specific people and feed off of them in the same way that we do in a larger house, but it's micro as opposed to macro. And I think it's a great place to hone songs that you're working on and to work on storytelling and being able to convey what you're trying to convey through song in an intimate setting. So I highly recommend it. I dig it.
Cabaret is very difficult, and it's a real adjustment to make if you've been on stage and you're used to the fourth wall, and it is breaking down that, and all of a sudden I'm going to share my life with you, share some songs, and bring you in. I mean, so it's a whole other, and a lot of people can't do it. It's because it's very difficult, and I'm not so sure I can do it that well yet. I'm still working on that, but it's a great exercise. It's a great exercise. And plus the repertoire is just incredible with all the great songs.
Well, we have time, 10 minutes, to take questions from the audience and the interweb.
Do I need a microphone?
So the thousands can hear you.
Right. So I have a resume question. Need a little bit of advice. Let me give you a quick background. I have my master's in opera, but when I came here to New York City, I did musical theater and straight theater. Well, it was hardly straight because it was all sex farce. But I found myself very quickly, I'm 6 feet tall, so I found myself, and a dancer, very quickly stereotyped as a showgirl, sexy girl, belter, Ula, yes. I've recently, because I've been a little pigeonholed and I'm getting a little older, I've been trying to go back to my operatic roots the past few years. Now, I received a piece of advice from an audition panel for something, and they said, when you're making your resume, make sure there are no holes, because that's going to raise eyebrows. And so, as I fill out my resume, I have no holes, but then someone looks at it and they say, oh, you don't want to have any of that on your resume. They don't want to know that. Don't tell them any of that. So then all of my life is just a huge hole. And so how do I let people know that, I've sung on the stage of the Kennedy Center. I have done off-Broadway and national tours. I'm not a nobody. I have performing experience. But it's not necessarily what they want to hear. What do I do about that?
I have no idea.
I know.
That's exactly what I said. I have no idea.
Talk to me at the end.
The biggest dilemma.
You need to talk to them. I think more people who make those decisions, you need to talk to.
Right.
I wouldn't know how to help you there. I mean, I think the people that make the decisions.
I've heard both
and you'll get different.
Yeah, I've heard varying replies, and because I think that because opera is so these days based upon being a little bit more of an acting singer, I would think that my experience would behoove me. But then there are some people who think that it should be completely separate.
I hate that. You are who you are.
You
I
are.
get on
Yeah.
there and go in there and give a killer audition.
Yeah.
That's what I do. Hear,
Yeah,
hear.
it's there's nobody like you. There's nobody like me.
Right.
It's really just being. Talk to her. It's just.
Hello.
Yeah,
I'm just curious, since you've all done a lot of different worlds with the opera and musical theater, if you've felt respected by the people that you're working with in the different worlds for having worked in the other world. Was that English? Did you understand what I just said? I'm just curious if you were ever disrespected, or not disrespected, but if you ever felt like, oh, she does musical theater, or oh, she's been in opera. I'm curious how you felt about that.
I'm fortunate I'm doing musical theater in an opera house, but the first rehearsal when we were there with both, because the cast consists of people from both sides. So it was always a standoff, like, okay, and you're looking at each other across the table, but I think we have so much mutual respect for one another that, I can watch Larry Teeter, for instance, do his thing, and I'm like, how in the hell does he do that? And he's looking at me going, how the hell does he make that sound? And so there really isn't, if you're a performer and you're a musician and you appreciate good work, then there is no reason to look down your nose at anyone else. Now, as far as the powers that be, I've been fortunate enough to be in the same setting, so I don't really get that. They can speak more on that, probably.
I haven't met those people yet, and I hope I never do. Mostly, I just feel like people are respectful on both sides. My fellow performers, I'd say, on both sides of the aisle. I'd say musical theater people are like, wow, I can't believe you sing opera. How do you do that? And then the opera singers are like, wow, how do you, just do scenes without, it's
Talent's very seductive, and everybody appreciates, wow, how do you do that, like they say, and I know when you're doing a show like Showboat or South Pacific, and you get the musical theater people, and it's a wonderful mix of energies. Yeah. And respect, I think. I don't think I don't think so.
It's funny,
if they do, that's their problem.
Yeah,
right.
The more you're out with real performers and you're really doing the job, that whole standoffish crap is over with. There's no room for that. We're all working and we're all admiring one another. We're all trying to get the job done. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Another question here?
So how do you guys deal with memorizing, first opera, like huge roles, and secondly, musical theater, short roles in a really short amount, 1 or 2, 3 days amount of time?
Well, opera, I don't do 2 or 3 days. I do my first Zaccaria in Nabucco in September. I've already started learning it because and for me, I'm not that smart, so I have to go repetition. So I'll pay $100 an hour for a coach, and I'll do 100 coachings just to get it in my brain, because I'm not the person that's going to go home and not watch Sports Center, so I got to leave and have someone teach it to me. But I know how I learn, and at the end of the day, as Ken Noda says, they don't care how you learned it, as long as you haven't learned it, you show up for the first day. So.
Everybody knows how their process, and it's important to know that and do it that way, because everybody's learning curve is different.
Y'all know, though, that the big difference, which I can't believe I didn't say this before, between musical theater and opera is opera, you show up the first day and you know everything. Everybody knows everything. Musical theater, you show up the first day, and the first 3 days you spend learning everything. They teach it to you. Now, you can go ahead and learn it beforehand, and you'll be one step ahead of the game, but you will spend the first 3 days sitting there listening to everybody learn the music, because that is what you do.
Sounds like so much fun.
Oh, man. It can be very boring, I'm not going to lie. But the 2 or 3 day thing, the subway system is a blessing. I put it in my iPod and I listen, and I'm sitting there humming on the train. That's what I do to and fro auditions. You 40-minute commute if you live in Brooklyn, and you're pretty much done by the time you get to your audition. If that's all you're doing for 40 minutes. They're short scenes, It's not that. Use the subway. That's what I said.
Before you talked about, doing 8 shows, and then Mr. Morrison said that sometimes in the opera house you are preparing and working just that many times. But my question is, in the opera house, when you're doing the 8 shows, you're singing full out everything as the 8 times. But in the opera house, do you have to do that at all those Sitzprobes and rehearsals? So you're not really using your voice as much. I'm asking, in the opera house.
No, everyone makes their choices. I'm the type of person that hardly ever marks. But you can. We have that option, correct. So it is not the same gig. You do have the option of marking in opera rehearsals for the most part. So that was not a really apples to apples comparison. So.
you go ahead and then we'll come over there.
Okay. I was wondering if you've ever found any trouble in auditioning running into who you are versus industry expectations and how you deal with that.
What do you mean by who you are?
Like you as a singer, I think this is more so for musical theater, maybe for opera as well, but running into the industry expectation of I need you to do this or that, and it may not exactly be who you are, but they expect you to do it anyways.
Well, if they've heard you, if they've chosen the casting people to see you, you're a type that they're looking for. So you're already in the mix. Now there's 25 other girls in the mix too. Your job is just to give them you, and they may ask some adjustments. But does that answer your question? Sorta.
Who was it? Did you read it? Okay, that's yours.
Hi, I just want to say thanks to you all because this is such. I'm a longtime coach and conductor, and it's just really interesting to hear all the different things that are updating my thoughts on it. Like when they ask you to sing a little less. And you say, what do you mean, little less vibrato? It's like, I don't do that. So some of my singers have trouble with that. So I would love to just hear if anybody has a specific idea. I also had a little bit more of a personal question to Lauren because I was at Pericot last night and I just thought you were great. Do they let you keep your green nail polish during the show?
It's chipping off. I did this myself. I was just so into the show.
So great. And how do we find out? I live very near Henry's and I know Steve for a long time. How does one find out?
Once a month. It's called Sing for Your Supper, and I believe it is the first Monday of the month. I'm not exactly sure.
I can call them.
Yeah. But you make reservations, you eat dinner, and then the show is it's at 10. It's quite late, but it's a lot of fun. And they're all usually Juilliard students. And then every once in a while, like Mary Testa or like Judy Kay.
Or you come on in when you have an
cool.
off night from the
Yeah.
Anyway, so the other question, thank you for that. The other question was just to how to address for singers, because I mostly work with classical opera singers because I'm a linguist and that's why they come to me. But when they have these crossover auditions and they try to like find who am I versus who they want me to be and how to, and I don't know if you have any up-to-date words of wisdom on that because that would be really great.
You just got to be yourself.
And when they ask you to do less vibrato, if you just can't do it without messing up your technique, you say, I'm sorry, I don't do that.
Or try.
I get asked that all the time. I seriously, every musical theater audition I have, it's either just sing and let me hear your vibrato, or can you do less vibrato? Really the other, like, Where's Charlie? I did after like 3 days of rehearsal. Rob Urban was like, just sing. Why are you controlling your vibrato? And that was great and releasing. But then on the other hand, I go in for a lot of auditions. They're like, can you just make it just straight tone it? Can just put it there at the end like a little, bam, like Emerald. It's kind of a musical theater thing. If you can do it, do it. If it's hurting, don't do it. I mean, there's no reason to sacrifice your voice for one job.
I mean, it's a church job thing too, as you probably know.
So it's like,
all right, so
sacred music.
I'm tripping because I didn't know that you could control the level of your vibrato without. I know you can cut it on or off, but I didn't know you could make it more or less.
So you learned something.
Breath pressure and how much you put in there. For me, you control it with placement, I guess. I don't know. All right.
You won't ever get that.
I don't think I'll. Can you straight tone that version?
I think we have time for one last question.
I'm primarily a conductor, and I work mostly in opera, but I also do a lot of new opera and a lot of new works. And because I do many new works in the opera world, I've been asked to do new works in the musical theater world more and more. And I've sometimes been hesitant to take on jobs because I see more and more in musical theater you have this thing where the orchestra is in 3 rooms backstage, or I'm working with a director right now on an operetta who does a lot of musical theater, and she says, why would you spend so much money hiring an orchestra? I did this show recently, and we just bought a really great recording of just the orchestra playing, and why don't you just use that, and you can still conduct, and
because y'all don't do anything anyway, right?
Right, yeah.
But I'm wondering if that's something that you see a lot of, or if that's something that you see as getting worse in the musical theater world, or something that's
Well, yeah, the orchestras are being cut down. I mean, I just was with Jonathan Tunick last week, and Jonathan Tunick, you all know who Jonathan Tunick is. Great orchestrator, probably the greatest alive now. He was saying, you know, he has done what? Sweeney Todd, he's reorchestrated it down. He says, all of my things are down now. Foley's down, light music down. Orchestras are getting smaller and smaller, and yet they're wanting them to make them sound like a full orchestra. But we're only giving you 12 people. You know, it's a sad reality.
That's
Oh, I hate to end on that note.
Well, there are so many things to discuss about the rest of the operatic world, but I feel like you guys have given us some wonderful information about your experiences and your careers in opera, in musical theater, in rock music. We didn't get to talk too much about television, but I'm sure if you all have questions about that, Ron would be happy to answer them. Thank you all so very much for doing this with us this evening. And thank all of you for attending. Please join us for some wine and some snacks in the back, and you're welcome to talk with our panelists. We're going to take a quick picture with them, and then everyone enjoy.
Bravo.